Well, my name is Diane Thuat McDonald, and I'm a teacher librarian. Not all schools have teacher librarians. We are very fortunate to have one at our school. And what the teacher librarian does is I go from class to class and do different projects with the teachers and with the students. So I'm very lucky, or I find I'm very lucky. I have the best job in the world because I get to teach from kindergarten up to grade 5. And so little ones to bigger students and sometimes even older students. So usually my students are from 5 years old up to they would be about 10 years old, 10, 11 years old.
Thank you.
And I live in Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is a city that's in the center of Canada. We don't have any mountains. It's very flat, as flat as can be. It's mostly agriculture that we have in this part of the country, and lots of farming.
So let us invite my students to interact with you. Have you ever been to India?
I have been to India
Oh,
a long time ago. I worked in a country called Bhutan, which is not very far from India. And so on my way there, I stopped in India, and also I have traveled around India.
wow.
I started in Calcutta, did New Delhi, and then many went down south up to.
Okay. How did you enjoy the Indian hospitality?
I enjoyed it. I found that the people were very kind, and lots of people, which I wasn't quite used to, but I did enjoy the hospitality. I was traveling with another friend as well, so that was really good. And we also were in Kerala to visit one of the teachers because I was teaching in Bhutan for 2 years. So we have a lot of teachers that are from India. And I ended up going to Kerala and meeting his family in that. So that was really nice.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your lovely and memorable experiences in India. And I would like to ask one of my students to ask the questions. So, Myasri, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. My name is Somyasri, an 8th grade student from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. Namaste from India.
Namaste.
I am so proud to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, go ahead.
What topics do you teach as part of art?
The topics that I teach is, because I'm a teacher librarian, I usually start with a book, and depending on what the teachers want, I usually will probably teach what they want. So one of the things that I've done with some of the classes, they were grade 3, so they would be about 8 years old. And so we did a project about the Inuit people, who are the people that live up north of Canada. And we did a project where we ended up learning about the Inuit people and did an art project based on an artist who's a Canadian artist. His name is Ted Harrison. And he does beautiful paintings of the North. I think he's originally from England, but he has been living in the North for a very long time and has done beautiful pictures. So we started learning how to do this painting. And then in groups, the students did this beautiful painting with lots of colors. And then we ended up using stop motion animation. I don't know if you know what stop motion animation is.
No, we are not
Do you
aware
know
of.
what?
No, we are not aware of.
So basically, it is like you take many, many pictures and you move an object just a little bit. And as you're moving the object, then it creates an animation, and you could add some sound as well to it. So we ended up creating so that they had some of the animals from the north that were moving. And we also had a person from that area that was moving along, and we would explain what the different things were in the north. So like that was one of the art projects that we did.
Wow, that's really amazing. Nanda Kishore, over to you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. This is Nandakishore, an 8th grade student from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. I would like to ask a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, go ahead.
My question is, at a time of digital era, how do we cultivate the habit of reading among your students?
Among my students, most of my students do enjoy coming to the library. So we make it so that it's a really interesting place that people want to come. And most of the students enjoy coming to the library, and we try to have many different books. And we also have books that represent different students. So we have people that actually do come from India. So we try to have books that represent the Indian people. We'll try to represent people that come maybe from China, people that come from Philippines. We have many, many students that come from different parts of the world. So we try to have books that represent everybody so that they can feel like they're part of the story. And I love to read. So I read a lot to my students, and a lot of picture books. And for the older kids, some of the graphic novels, they really enjoy graphic novels. And we have many, many books. We're very, very lucky that we have all these wonderful books. And I have also a colleague who what her job is to read to the students. And so she reads all these different books. And so that the students get to know all these books and these different authors. And then they think, wow, this is actually fun. And so then they start to read as well.
Yes.
Do you like to read?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what kind of books do you read?
Interesting stories. Yes, sir. Storybooks.
Interesting.
An 8th grade student. I'm so glad today to interact with you. I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to.
Is the current curriculum in Canada competent enough to produce global citizens?
I believe that it is. It depends on the teachers, but we do try to make sure that the students know about other countries and about some of the problems that are happening in other countries and how we can help in Canada to help other people from all over the world and what we can do. So sometimes we have different projects. Sometimes it's about water. In one of my classes, we were talking about water and how water was not always accessible everywhere in the world. And what could we do, like, to help out? So we started writing letters even to our government to say, like, look, we need to have good drinking water for everyone in the world. And so that's how we started. And we tried to do other projects to help all over and to learn about other countries. I think it's important that we learn about other countries and to help out to become good citizens.
I am Rita, a student from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. I am so privileged to interact with you. Namaste from India. My question is, what education system is popular in Canada?
So I think
didn't quite.
she broke up a lot.
Yes.
So yes, Rutika, could you please ask the question one more time, please?
What What education system is popular in Canada?
Okay. Well, we have different systems all over Canada. One of the systems that's important in Canada is we have what is called a French immersion school, and that is very popular here in Canada. And it makes the people that are learning a different language that do not know French can learn French at a very young age and can continue up to their grade 12. So right up to their last year of education before they go to university. So that's called a French immersion. That means that the school is completely taught in French. We also have an Ukrainian program, and we are starting to have Indigenous programs also that are coming also that are starting up in Canada. So those are the most popular ones.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. I am so glad today to ask you a question. Here, my question is: what kind of projects do your students do?
My projects are always what the teachers want. So sometimes I work on Indigenous projects. We have a lot of Indigenous people. They are the First Nations that were here in Canada. So we learn about them. And so I did a project, we did a small movie project learning about the Indigenous people that were here and what their lives were like a long time ago. And then we did a small movie about them. Another project that I did was we used these robots that we have. We have what is called a dash robot. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a kind of a blue robot, and it's pretty cool. And so we created a big map with our community, and then we coded him, and then he would go from place to place, and he would go and tell you about all the different places that we have in our community. So those are some of the projects that I have done with some of my students. We try to do quite a bit of coding because coding is important, and so I try to introduce it to the different classrooms. So those are just a few of my projects that I've done.
Good morning, ma'am. This is Navyasri, an 8th grade student from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. I am so privileged to ask you a question. Namaste from India. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, absolutely.
What kind of technology is used in your classroom?
In my classrooms or in the classrooms, we use laptops. We have two sets of laptops, and they go from one classroom to another. So we have to share all the laptops, and we also have some iPads. So we have to share also the set of iPads, and they go from class to class. And then we also have what is called a makerspace. And in our makerspace, we have all sorts of different technologies there that we can use. So we have some cameras, we have makey, which is a kind of electrical system that we can do. We have robots that we can use. So those are some of the technologies that we have in our classes.
Today to interact with you. I would
I
like
am
to
too.
ask you a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Here my question is, how are teachers recruited in Canada?
Teachers in Canada first have to have a teacher's certificate. So they have to go to university, and they go to university for about 4 years, and some for 5 years. It depends on the program. my country is divided into provinces. And so each province is a little bit different. So I have to, in my province, I went to university for 5 years, and then I was able to become a teacher. And because I was lucky because I speak French and English. And so if you speak French and English, it's a little bit easier to get a job as a teacher than if you only speak English. But there are teachers that speak all different languages, and there are teachers that will speak Ukrainian, and there's now Ukrainian schools, and there's even now a school in Winnipeg that's starting up an Hindu classroom. So I think that's a pretty cool thing. So it's really interesting to see because I can certainly show you. Okay, I'll just move here a little bit. Okay, so right now I'm just going to show you. Just have to switch the camera to. Okay, I'll show you this way, I think. I'll show you that my dog's here. This is one of my dogs. So his name is Chewy.
So cute.
He's really, really friendly. And this one's not so friendly, but he's cute.
Yes.
Hey, Lebo. Okay, so that's my other dog.
Yes.
His name is Lebo, the handsome one. And I'm going to show you right now. It's raining outside.
Uh-huh. So is it summer over there in your country?
Yes. Summer we can have up to 35 centimeters. It was 35 centigrade. Usually that's really hot for us. So our summers are pretty hot, but our winters are very cold.
I know that.
So I'll just try and see if I can show you a little bit of outside right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just without getting my dogs outside, but I don't know if you can see, but
it's a rainy morning.
Yeah, it's a rainy morning right now.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Thank you so much. One of my students, Pranita, over to you. Pranita, yes.
Sir. Yes, sir. Good morning, ma'am. This is Pranita, an 8th grade student. I am so glad to ask you a question. Here, my question is, what kind of 21st century skills are taught in Canadian classrooms?
Well, in Canadian classrooms, certain things that need to be taught is for the 21st century is creativity, collaboration is very important, and inquiry. Learning to ask some questions is very important, and not just a question where you ask a question and it's just a yes or no question. Like the questions that you have asked me are excellent questions because you get to learn about my country and about how things work in the country. So I try to teach the students how to ask proper questions, like questions like why or how does that work? So those are the types of questions that we want to learn, and we try to do lots of problem solving and work together as groups to be prepared for the working world. So those are some of the things that we do.
Okay, so daily, what I have observed that Canada is a country where you can find all races, all religious people, all religions, and all the people from different parts of the world.
Yes,
so
very much so.
When you deal with those students, especially non-English background students, and do you follow any specific strategy to communicate with them?
Well, we have had lots of students that sometimes don't even speak a word of English or a word of French. So it is a very big challenge for us, like, you know, as a teacher to try to communicate So sometimes what we do, like with one of the students, and she was from, I think she was from Afghanistan originally. And so we try to program like a translation program to help out, like, which helps her understand, like, to make sure that she's understanding like correctly of what's going on. And then she could also ask questions like in her language, and then it's translated into English and that. So we had an iPad for her to help her out. She was an older student, so it was a little bit easier for her to be able to do that. For someone who is younger, it's a little bit more difficult. But for the younger students, they learn fairly quickly, like because I've seen students that like did not know a word, but after like a while of being around like other kids, like they learn very quickly. It's amazing. So I think just by listening, like,
Yes.
and by looking at what's going on, like they learn very quickly.
So usually, how long does it take for these kids who come from the non-English background and to communicate with the other English-speaking people? How long does it take? Does it take 2 years time or 3 years time?
It varies. I think of some girls that were from Ecuador, and they were starting kindergarten. So they were really, really young. They were about 5 years old. And already like this year, they are in grade 1. And already like I've seen a big progress for them, like to be speaking in English, because they hardly spoke a word like last year, and they wouldn't really try or anything. And this year, like you can see that they're understanding a little bit more and are actually trying in that. But it's from being around, like they're immersed. They don't have a choice, like, but to try to communicate. And kids are not afraid to try. Like
Yes.
adults just more like, I'm so afraid to try, to speak a different language when I know that the other person speaks it. So I think it's more like by listening and lots of visuals. I think that's something that's also very important at a very young age, but also at an older age, like to have lots of visuals and the written word under it. Like sometimes, like for French, like they're learning French from the very beginning and they don't know French. So we put a lot of words around the classroom. So like, and we'll say, this is this and this is that. And eventually they pick it up. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, in Canada, if you learn French and English, you can survive. So French is because of the influence of France, and English
Yes.
as usual because of the British influence.
Yes.
And other than these two languages, French and English, and what is the third and the fourth language, which is quite dominant in Canada?
I think that, well, they're trying to revive the indigenous languages because of things in the past. Unfortunately, horrible things have happened. And so a lot of the indigenous people have lost their language. So they're starting to try to have their languages now be taught in the schools. So I would say that's definitely one of the languages that's important. I would say that in Winnipeg, one of the languages that's very important is the Ukrainian language. That would be probably the third language that's very important. We do have a fairly large community now of Indian people from India that's in my area where I live, actually, because a lot of people on my street are from India. And there's a little bit north of where I live, there's a whole community of Indian people, yes, that come from India. And so I would say that's becoming quite important. Philippines as well, lots of Filipino people. And I'm trying to think of, so probably those languages for sure would be the next languages that are very important in Canada.
Yeah.
It varies from province to province, but where I live, it's very, very multicultural. I would say, like, on my street, I'm one of the minorities. So as a Caucasian, yeah.
As per my knowledge, in India, the Punjab is one of the states from where usually
Okay.
most of the Indians immigrate to Canada, and you can see the turbans about their heads.
Oh,
The
yes.
Punjabis. So, what subjects usually are taught in Canadian public schools, and what school system is popular in Canada, public or private?
So there we have public schools, we have private schools. We also have like religious schools. So like we have a Catholic school, and then there's some other religions that also have their own schools. So the public schools, we teach pretty much the same things like in the private and in the public, but it's just that there's more funding in the public schools. So there's like more things that are available in the private schools that we don't get in the public schools. So they have a lot more services for the students. They have a lot of more like technology. They would have everything that they need because they're paying for it. The parents are paying for it. And it's a lot of money also for parents to pay, like for the private schools. It's not necessarily affordable for everyone as well. So
Yes. And what kind of examination system is actually practiced in Canada? And that means how the students are tested. Are they tested on their textbook, or they tested on their knowledge, or the memory, or their intellectual ability? So in India, in the past, it used to on rote method and rote.
yes, I remember.
But in India, the examination reforms has actually have taken place, and due to that, system has slightly changed. But still, they are sounds like following the old method and the new method. So, how about in Canada?
In Canada, it's not just memory. It's they have to learn like critical thinking is part of like one of the things that students have to understand. Like they can't just, it's not just a yes or a no question or a one word answer. They have to explain, like, for example, if they're doing a math and they're a math problem, they have to explain to the teachers, how did they get that answer? They can't just put an answer. Otherwise, they won't get all the points like on a test. They have to explain, well, I decided that I had to multiply because in the problem it said that there was two groups of 4 students, how many students total, so I had to multiply the groups. Or I have to explain a little bit more than just put the answer 8, because if you just put 8, you wouldn't get most of your points. You have to explain to them, and you have to explain to them like in a full sentence as well, like of what is it that we're looking for. Like if you're asking how many animals are in total, I have to say, well, there are X number of animals in total. So that it's not just like like just a memory. They have to try to figure out like why they did that. So there's a lot more of that, like in math, especially. Math has changed quite a bit, like in the classrooms, and it's a different method of teaching and of testing as well.
Okay.
They do have some tests that are by the province and provincial tests. That is usually only certain grades get that. And but teachers are a little bit against it because sometimes you haven't even taught that and they're being tested on it. So it's a little unfair sometimes of how that's taught and tested. They do usually do some testing, but they also are evaluated on some of the projects that they do. So that way they see, like, their understanding. So there is that part of it. It's not just a test, because some people don't do well on tests, but they can do well. They can explain everything and you can see that they understood it, but they froze and they were just so nervous, like when it came down to the test. So there's a little bit of both.
Yes,
And
yes.
observation is another way of evaluating as well.
Okay, thank you so much. I have two more questions left.
Yes.
So one more question is, if a student doesn't perform well, I mean, he's not up to the examination level. So what does a teacher that deals with his subject do? Does he give him a remedial teaching in that particular subject, or does the guy who doesn't perform well needs to take the test one more time, or what kind of strategy usually you can see in the classroom?
Usually, like for students that have trouble in the classroom, sometimes we get a chance to have a resource teacher. And the resource teacher sometimes will pull out that student and work with that student to help them out. But also sometimes there's just not enough time, or there's not enough people to be able to do that. So the teacher has to try to modify a little bit the lesson so that the student can learn and be able to do it. Because if they don't have the language, for example, well, how can they actually do what is asked, like on the test, when they don't even understand like the question? So sometimes we do have to modify it. So sometimes I had students that did not they had trouble reading what's their problems. So sometimes I had to read the question for them, and I just would do it orally and say, okay, this is the question. Can you tell me what's going on? And then they were able to do it, but otherwise they wouldn't be able to do it and they would just fail. And it's unfortunate because sometimes they do understand a lot more, but because they're just not quite there yet. And so you just have to modify in different ways depending on the student.
So here is my last question. In this 21st century, the teachers, especially whether it is in Canada or in India, they need to upgrade their professional skills so as to match with the changing scenarios. So what kind of training sessions, I mean, are placed for the teachers working in public sector and private sector?
For the teachers, they sometimes will get some workshops and to help them, like especially with the technology that's moving such at a rapid pace. So sometimes they have to take different workshops that are given by either teachers, or we have different consultants that also teach certain teachers. And then sometimes those teachers will teach other teachers, like in the school. Like last year, I was the technology teacher, so as well as the teacher librarian. So often I would sometimes like give a mini lesson to some of the teachers to show them how to use certain, whether it's the iPad or like now there's the AI that's also very, that's coming up right now. So like I would teach them a little bit how to use it, and in the school environment as well, because sometimes I find that we teach like a certain technology, but it's not necessarily something that's like for the school. So like I would try to make it so that I incorporate it into some of my lessons with the teachers, and that way they get to learn how to use it. So I guess that would be the best way to explain how we do it.
Thank you so much. And before we wrap up this session, you have understood that my students are so curious to learn different things across the globe, and you see that they are traveling all the countries virtually, and even Africa, North America, South America, and Europe, and everywhere they are actually, and they are so curious, and that means they are proving they are the global citizens. So, do you think these kind of sessions are helpful to these kids who are living currently in one of the tiniest villages located in southern part of India? And do you think this kind of knowledge
Absolutely.
is helpful to them?
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful that they get to travel and see like how things are done and like different accents. I'm sure, like, just listening to my English compared to, English in India is different too. And I think it is such a wonderful idea. Like, I think that they learn so much. I used to do quite a bit of Skypes around the world, like with my students. Now, like, my job is a little bit different, and this year I'm taking a year off. So, but yeah, I think it is such a wonderful thing for them to do, because like we talk, well, I know that with my students, they want to know, like, well, what do you eat? Like, what kind of meals do you eat, like, every day? And like, do you walk to school? How do you get to school? And things like that. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity for students to be able to see and to talk and to get to know other students from around the world or other teachers. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you so much. And could you please give a final message to my students?
Well, I am so happy to have met you. I think you are all so wonderful, and you had such great questions. Like, I had to think about these questions, so that was good. So I actually wrote some ideas down because I had forgotten about some of them. And so I had to write them down, but I was a little nervous. But then once I started, I felt very comfortable, and you all made me feel very comfortable and very welcome. And I hope that you enjoyed the session of speaking with me. And if you want to speak with me another time, that would be wonderful, because I really enjoyed this. And I enjoy talking to other students from everywhere.
Thank you so much, Daini, for your valuable time. We thoroughly enjoyed this session, and we look forward to have you one more time again. And if there